Donna McNally, and I take care of the cemetery records for the Onaga, and I also sell the plots when people need a lot for the city. So. Yeah, I've done a lot of research on the cemetery and a lot of interesting people in this cemetery. The most interesting ones I found this time. Yes. Yes. Okay. This is, forget his first name, Jerry Conway, and he was in the Vietnam War, and he got 3 Purple Hearts while he was in that war.
Which war did you say it was?
The Vietnam. Okay, and who's this down here? Okay, William Sherman Clark. He owned and operated a variety store in Onaga in the 1930s. Is what I have down on him. This one is Simpson B Chilcock. He was a doctor in Onaga. He always had asthma his entire life. He went every place he could think of to get help for it, and it just never got better. Down through the years, he became unbalanced and was taken to the state hospital, and this is where he died. He graduated from the medical college in Cincinnati in 1878, and he practiced medicine in Oskaloosa, and that's where his first wife and baby are buried. He also practiced in Onaga Garrison and Wheaton. At one time, he was known as the best professional man, and that was in 1978 that he was granted that title. I wondered how come there's so many doctors in this cemetery that don't have stones, but I got to thinking back then they didn't really get paid money. It was like chickens, apples, whatever people had to give them. If they butchered, they got a ham or whatever, and so really they didn't have money. So that's why I think most of them don't have a stone. Very few of them do. Chilcott, yes. Simpson B Chilcock. I don't know that it said what years. He died in 1913, so it had to probably have been early 1900s, or he graduated from school, 18 something. But he was 60 years old when he died. He was not old when he died at all. So it would have been the late 1800s, early 1900s is when he practiced. So,
Great.
I have a book that all the people that bought graves, whenever they first started, you had to buy 6 sites. You couldn't just buy 1 or 2. And he has other people here, some of his children, and I'm sure they're probably there too. And I just go down through that book and find their name. And then I've had Deanna go check, and usually there's somebody in those sites. And it usually tells on there, the records weren't very good in the 30s at all, at probably early 40s. But I just go by that. Usually they have marked out if these people didn't use that and somebody else bought it. So that's how I find them.
That's kind of by deduction.
Yeah. Or a lot of time it's like if there's relatives, if somebody's not in a marked grave, it's relatives. Like we're across from 3. Down here where that metal thing is, it's clear down there. You can see it sticking up. See the Hoover stone? And then that was a baby, and their last name was Fouch, but she was a Hoover. And the baby died, and they buried it there, and that's all that they could afford for a stone at that time. And then the family moved on to Oklahoma, and the mother died there. So I think there's some Hoovers in that place also, because there's Hoovers that we don't know for sure where they're at, but we're kind of guessing that's probably where they are, because none of that family ever used that. This is Colonel Hubbard. Hubble. He was a commander for the 20th Regiment of Kansas Militia, and that would have been back. He was born in 1887, so it would have had to have been the turn around the 1900s, early 1900s. Well, his wife was. She was an O'Meara. So that's where he came from. I don't have a lot of information on him. I just try to pick out some of them that were in the Civil War. I don't think it said. Yes. He was born in New York in 1820. Well, it says Kansas. And it doesn't have a lot about him. It doesn't say when he came to Kansas.
Kansas militia that I'm aware of was established during the Indian Wars when that was the name of that governor that wanted to be president. But Sherman put out a call for more troops down into Oklahoma Territory to suppress the Indians, and he put together the Kansas militia to go down there, and Major Jenkins would have been one of the 3 majors appointed as the one I'm aware of, because he formed it specifically to go down to make a big splash down there. And so they put together almost 2,000 men and headed south.
And you said it too.
Camped by
Ordway.
where Wichita was, and they had a guide hired to take them on to Camp Supply in Oklahoma Territory, and he got them lost in the Chalk Hills in a blizzard, and they ended up eating some of their horses. By the time they got to Camp Supply, Custer had left that morning for the Washita Massacre. He just got tired of waiting on them.
George Ordway came from Massachusetts, and he died when he was 26 years old. He worked for a company in Kansas City, and a premature blast went off and killed him. And there were 3 other guys, and they said that they were dismembered and unrecognizable. So he's an unmarked grave here. Yeah, he came on the train. They got him off the train.
So what would have been his connection here? The grandmother? I think the parents lived here.
Yes, and then they moved on.
They moved on.
Ordway. Yes. No, it's right there. And I think there is a grandmother buried there or somebody else. I'm thinking his mother was from around in this area, if I remember right.
So do you have any kind of plan to try to mark these graves so that
As soon as Deanna gets done.
once we figure out where they are?
Yeah. Then
figure out who they are.
yeah, then we're going to mark. There's several that we will never know, but the biggest majority of them, families kind of stayed together. And if you've got the name and everything, and more all the time, there's more names going on to find a grave in Onaga. So The new one I found here a while back, his last name was Patty, and we'll never know where he was buried, but he came here to help build the city of Onaga. He was a carpenter, and Patty, like St. Patty's Day. Yeah, and then the family went back where they came from. I think it was Illinois, maybe. And so I don't know how we'll ever find him because there's not much information on the family at all. So, but anyway, he's just showed up, whoever found him. So. Mr. Grover came to Kansas in a time when Onaga doesn't even exist. He said that they went under a lot of hardships, and the neighbors lived miles and miles away, and the Indians roamed the prairie. He said that they came, I'll check in a minute, they came from Iowa in a covered wagon drawn by oxen was their mode of travel. And he said that Indians were all around him and they lived in wigwams. So.
This was the Delaware outlet, this part.
Mm-hmm. So, he was born in 1851 and he died in 1925. He was 74 years old. But he came with his parents, so he was really a young child when he came here. But there's a discrepancy on his, the marriage date and the headstone. It shows that he was born in 1851. Well, that's what it says up here, 1851, so I don't see if there is a problem. And he had 5 children. And I think it's just him and his wife that are buried here. I don't think anybody else is. The children all moved on, if I remember right. And George Grover was his father. And it says when he was 57 years old, he walked 53 miles. Or no, when he was 53, he walked 50 miles in 12 hours. So he was quite, yeah, he had to have been in really good shape to do that. I wish they would have told where he went. I'm sure nobody went and picked him up, so he had to have gone so far and then come back. But it didn't tell that. Yeah, why did he do that? Yeah. He must have just and he came from, well, maybe. I'm not sure, but I just thought that was quite interesting. So, and if he walked from where they lived up north, who knows how far he went or which direction. But I just thought that was pretty neat.
He could have been carrying a message to somebody.
And he could have been.
Yeah.
It just didn't say enough. I wish it would have said more. And the Langvar, this boy was 15 years old. He had been over here from Switzerland only 2 years, and he was helping a neighbor, and a bolt of lightning came out of the sky and killed him and his horse. It says that his clothes were ripped from the side of his body and disclosed a black spot as large as your hand. Yeah. Marcus Langvar came from Indiana in 1970. No, that's when he died. It doesn't tell when he came. He was born in 1941. He, during the Civil War, he did his country's call and enlisted in the 100th Infantry in September 1862 and served 3 years. He was captured and placed in the Andersonville prison, where he remained 6 months prior to the close of the war in 1865. It was down south. I can't remember right now. I've studied that a lot because my dad's side of the family came from the south, so I've done a lot of research on the south, but I don't remember right now where that's at. Georgia? Is that where it's at? This picture shows he only had one eye. The other one is closed. He's kind of a rough looking guy. I think he had a rough life. And he had 5 children. So now we're going to move into block 2. Laurel Summers came from Indiana. He was born in 1866 and he died at Wheaton in 1930. He died because of a wreck. The steering apparatus quit working and he went off in a ditch. He had his wife with him. It broke some vertebrae in his neck and he died several hours afterwards. At the age of 7, he moved to Rice County, Kansas with his parents, and that's where he went to school. And in 1890, he began the pursuit of a chosen profession, graduating from the Marion Sims College of Medicine of St. Louis, Missouri. He stayed in Rice County for a while because his father was so ill and he wanted to take care of him. He ended up in Wheaton, Kansas in 1900, and he and his brother William purchased a drugstore. And he also practiced medicine in that building. In 1905, he was married to Lottie M. Ott, and she is buried in Wheaton, and they had a son from this marriage. And I've not quite figured out why his second wife put him here, unless she didn't want him buried next to the first wife. I'm not sure. But then she took off and went to California, and that's where she's buried. So it's just kind of like she dumped him here and left. But that just stumps me how he ended up at Onaga when he did everything at Wheaton. So I can't tell you any more about him. I just found him yesterday, so I've kind of been... it was Laurel, Laurel. The middle name was A. I cannot remember. Summers, Summers. This man is quite fascinating. His name was Dr. Peter Dockler. He was born in 1805, and he was 102 years old when he died, and he was still practicing medicine. His father was a French revolutionist, and he sent his wife to Athens to escape threatened violence. He came to the U.S. in 1840, and he located at New Orleans at the French quarters. He then moved to California, and then he moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that's where he met his first wife. She had 4 children from another marriage. Kansas was where he was permitted permit by the state of Kansas in 1879 to practice medicine here. He enlisted in the Civil War the 7th Ohio Volunteer Regiment. He served only 3 months when his first wife was sick, and he died of consumption. I'm not quite sure. I've been told what that is, but I forget. Consumption? It's what? Tuberculosis. So, but when he first came here, he was wounded twice in the Battle of Bull Run. And he was wounded in the War of Mexico. And when he came to Kansas, he first settled at Neuchatel. And then I'm just going to read this, as this is so long, but I don't know where to quit with it. He lived in a 3-room house on Lucian Street, doing his own cooking and housework, nursing and furnishing the ills with brews he concocted at the age of 1. 101, yes, sorry. He never refused a sick call, no matter how long the drive or how cold or stormy the night. He was kind-hearted and was given away more medicine than he was ever paid for. He was married twice. He had an adopted son, Will Stevens, and he lived in Kansas City at the time of his death. It says that he was a Republican and never failed to cast his vote. As a physician and surgeon, the doctor was widely known throughout the state, especially in the younger days. And there are numbers of people who have never employed any other physician. In 1907, he had numerous letters from correspondents wanting his picture and biography. Let's see. I'll shorten this up a little bit. Oh, it was Robert Keeney and William Randall who found him at his house on a Sunday morning. They hadn't seen him for a couple of days. Went to the funeral home, and he picked out his casket and paid for it, and it was lined with silver. And then he came out here. This was when he was 88 years old. He decided he needed to do this. He came out here and he walked all through this cemetery, and he decided he wanted a place on top of the hill where he could see everything. And he did a good job of picking the spot. And he's the only one that's buried in his plot. There's nobody else there. I do know that his second wife, he was 62 and his second wife was 18. Wow. And that marriage didn't last a long time. Oh, here it tells that, yeah, he purchased a nice, comfortable coffin with a silver-plated trim and a raised headrest. And that it was to be given possession to be given on demand. And then it tells how he came out here. He wanted a high, dry spot with an eastern exposure, permitting a fine view of the surrounding country, and he did a good job of that. Oh yes, this guy's a character. Henry Krause came from New Jersey, and he was born in 1843. He must have had quite a sense of humor, because his poster says that he ran the Horse Hotel, which was the livery stable. Let me see if I can read the rest of this. My glasses aren't good enough. I can't read the rest of this. Something about harnesses. Anyway, he ran the livery stable. This small writing.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I had a magnifying glass when I read that.
Oh, it said good. Oh yeah, good rigs and drivers.
Yeah, traveling men handled with care.
Traveling men handled with care.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I did have a sunglasses.
He joined the militia and played his part during the border war between Missouri and Kansas. After he came to Kansas when it was made a state and the Civil War closed. He walked, oh, this is the guy I really like. He walked to Omaha, Nebraska, and got a job there. And he drove an ox team hauling freight from Omaha to Cheyenne, Wyoming. He also freighted from Cheyenne to Salt Lake City, Utah, and took material to build the Mormon temple. While he had this occupation, he became friends with numerous Indian tribes and learned their language, custom, making himself known by the Indians. And they called him their white friend. He saw the Indians in peace and also when they were on the warpath. He went to Nevada and did some mining. He owned a mine there at one time. Then he met his wife, Sarah Winstead, and one child was born at Chanute, Kansas. In 1874, the family came to Pottawatomie County, Kansas, settling at Bellevue. He and his brother Lorenzo drove a herd of cattle, and the family traveled in a covered wagon. He lived at Bellevue for 2 years at Cross Creek, north of Onaga. It was during this time that he lived north of Onaga that there was a grasshopper infestation. His team became so poor it was necessary to use a pitchfork to urge the horses to go. But he saw a lot of country. He was an interesting man. Davis was 16 when he joined the service for the Civil War. He enlisted in Company E, 121st Regiment of Ohio. He came down with typhoid fever and was discharged from the Army in 1863. On regaining his health, he again enlisted in 1864, Company G, 88th Regiment of Ohio, and was discharged on July 4th, 1865, whenever the war closed. He then was a cashier at the bank in Cincinnati, and then he went to school and became a civil engineer. It says at the time when the state was still inhabited by Buffalo and Indians, he was one of the parties who did the surveying, located the right-of-way for the main line of the Union Pacific, then known as the Kansas Pacific Railroad. And he also had 4 children. Let's see, it's the second one, I think. One of these stones is written in German. It's the only one in this cemetery. It might be that one. It's gotten in worse shape. It's hard to read. It's not that one, is it? No, it was his first wife. But the stone's in German, and that is the only stone in this cemetery. Yes. And his first wife was moved from the Duluth Cemetery to here. His second wife is buried at the State Hospital in Topeka. And then this was his third wife. His first wife, they had 8 children. And then each wife he married probably had close to that many. So there were a lot of children in his household during the time. But I wanted to show you the German, and it's just not showing up. The sun really has to shine on it to see it. So, but that would be his father there then.
The son, the father.
Mm-hmm.
So are these related to the Hartwigs that are
Yes.
around here?
Yes. His son Robert would be Ramona Tessendorf's father. So this would have been her grandfather. Yeah.
There's a lot of doctors in here.
Yes.
Yeah. How many doctors?
That was the point I wanted to put across, how many doctors there are.
There was a bunch. Who was the one over here that was in the unmarked that lived to be 102?
Dr. Dockler.
Dockler. Oh yeah.
I think it was Dockler. When it was French, it wasn't like that. I mean, they just cut it down like they always did when they came to America. They changed their names some. But yeah, he was a fascinating man. No, there's more to his story, but I wasn't gonna. And this is Dr. Wilson. He came to Onaga in 1906, and it says that since that time he hardly missed a day caring for the sick until his health overtook him. The medical professional of his youth, he expected to go farther east, and he wanted to become a surgeon, but that never ever happened. He just stayed in Onaga. His duty in Onaga was 27 years long. Perhaps it says that if he would have fulfilled his youthful ambition, that he would have become a famous surgeon. And then it says that he was also a president of the First National Bank in the city of Onaga. And he was on the board, and that he was very active in all the town affairs. He was born in 1872, and he was 61 when he died. Seems like the doctors didn't live past 60, except Dr. Dockler. Well, I can just tell you about her.
Yeah.
This is our movie star. She was a painter, Violet Painter Baker, and she was born December 15th, 1902 in Onaga, Kansas. She had been an actress in the early years of movies in Hollywood. She and her daughter, Gloria Barnett, which she is buried right beside her. Her stage name was Gloria Elmore. They were involved in writing scripts and acting in several TV shows, including the old Hawaii Five-0. So we have, and that's all I have. This Carl, and that's just another Civil War veteran. So
is there a picture of the movie star?
no, there's just the tombstone, but surely somebody has one somewhere.
Violet Painter Baker.
It is 98 clear back down this way. It's quite a ways down, but it's grade 4. Yes, I was kind of excited when I found that one.
So Henry Hoover
I
is
mean, he didn't know a stranger. Never said a bad word about anyone.
pretty well
He was
acknowledged to be the first
such a-
settler in this area. He would have settled here and laid claim in October of 1856. And he had relocated from what's the county just north of Douglas? Anyhow, up there by Oskaloosa, he relocated over here because bleeding Kansas was so bad, according to the old settlers' tales. And anyhow, my friend over in that area sent me some history on it. And he had participated as a 16-year-old in the Battle of Hickory Point as an abolitionist. And that was up north of Oskaloosa on 16 Highway. And after the 2-day siege and one guy getting killed and a few of them shot up, they called an armistice and they all drank whiskey together afterwards. But the territorial headquarters at that time was Lecompton, between Topeka and Lawrence. And that article showed that they had jailed him, the territorial governor was pro-slavery at that time, and they jailed him for his participation in the Battle of Hickory Point. And so one night when the jailer took him down to the Kansas River to get a pail of water, he grabbed him by the britches and threw him in the water and then swam across the river and escaped. And so a month later, he's here. And he served all through the Civil War. Him and his brother enlisted, and his wife, Paulette, I believe, joined them. And they were in southeast Kansas, and his brother succumbed to pneumonia there. He contacted it and got better. Wife did the laundry for the regiment. He was eventually recovered and was wounded in the shoulder by a mini ball. He recovered from that and served the rest of the war. He was a true abolitionist. So him and his good buddy Moses Day, over there, the big one, Moses was supposedly the first settler south of Onaga, in the Vienna area. And legend has it that he came in there one day with a wagon load of whiskey and bought the whole Vermilion River Valley from the Indians for a wagon load of whiskey. I have no idea if it's true, but there's quite a bit of him in that book, Old Settlers' Tales, and it was telling that he enlisted in the war also and fought in the war. And not long before the war, he had captured a couple of wild buffalo calves out in the wilderness by where Waterville is now, and had brought them back, intending to tame them down and pull wagons. And after he left for the war, they grew and got rambunctious, and they had a big barbecue. But, Moses Day is from France, and they had settled in Iowa, and it took them 3 months by oxen to come from Iowa to here. And his wife said she never cooked a single meal that wasn't under the open stars through those 3 months. But anyhow, the last story about them two guys was in 1858 for the July 4th celebration. They decided they needed to have a big celebration. And so Henry Hoover, his homestead is actually the Martin place right down the hill here, in the springs, the mineral springs there. So he hauled water up here, and Moses Day brought meat, and they erected a 70-foot flagpole on that knoll to the north here and made a huge American flag. And in 1858, they celebrated Independence Day here, and 200 people came. How far would you have had to come in 1858 to find 200 people around here? And how many different languages would they have been speaking? But it was important enough to them all then to come and join in a celebration. And according to the book Old Settlers' Tales, that flagpole stood for 80 years before it fell down. So when I preach to the senior class, history class, I really like to point that out to them and how significant that was.
I have a story. When I think the person is buried, it's a young kid. I think he was 16. His last name's Lister. But our great-grandson, this is his first year in 4-H, and we went down to Alma to watch him show his stuff this year. And there was this little trailer for sale, and of course Roger had to buy it. Why, I don't know. David's using it, but he's not. But anyway, there was a lady that lived next door to him, and she came out, and he goes by me, and he goes, "She's a pain in." And I thought, oh, gee, do I want to talk to her? And she starts in telling her family history and how she came from Dover. And I said, well, that's where my dad was born. And she said, well, what's his name? And I said, Lewis Smith. And she goes, well, I'm related to you. And I thought, I doubt that. And she names all of his sisters and his parents and the whole bunch. Come to find out, she is. And I'm going to go down with my cousin because she said I have a lot of Smith pictures that you need to see. But anyway, this Lister came from Dover, and so he has to be related to her, and so therefore he's related to me. And I just thought, isn't that strange? I would have never got the connection if I hadn't met this lady. Never. And I found her fascinating. I didn't see what he saw in her at all. So you never know where you're going to find your relation.
Yeah.